Oh, hi, welcome back to Two-Style Workshop. Today we're going to make a chandelier. It's actually my version of the Greene Greene style that's in the Gamble House out in California. And for those of you who don't know, Greene Greene were actually architects in the arts and crafts movement. They designed a house for David B. Gamble, who is a son of one of the Procter and Gamble founders. And they designed the house, they designed the furniture and everything. And some of the things are really, really cool. So if you get the chance, pull up their website and take a look. But I'm going to make my version of their chandelier, and mine's going to be for outside, so I'm going to change it a little bit. The wood I'm going to use is white oak. And white oak is really good for outdoor projects. Some front doors are even made from white oak. Old Ironsides, the Navy boat from the colonial period, was made from white oak as well. But what I'm going to do is use 6-quarter oak and some 4-quarter oak. And what I like to do is use one piece for the top rail and the bottom rail, so that way they match. But I'll make the top first, and then we'll work on the cloud lift features. The cloud lift are actually pretty neat too, where that comes up, and so it'll be obviously smaller than this, but this is from a desk that I did a few years back. Nice little feature. Everything in their style has really rounded and soft edges, so you'll see me using the router quite a bit. So stay tuned. All right, for the ceiling portion, I'm going to start over here at the sliding miter. I've already planed and joined the material, so what I'll do is take off a little bit, so that way if there's any snipe I can eliminate that. And I'll do that on both ends, but square up one end, flip it, and then I'll cut it to length. All right, so since this project is all about the wood matching, these are all going to be the legs, if you will, of the piece, and I want all these to match. So I'm actually going to label them beforehand, before I take them apart, before I rip them, because if I don't, then I may put the wrong pieces together, and then I know which side was facing which way. Then when I put them together, they'll look like they were made to be there. Right, so now we're going to do a little glue up, because we're going to glue these up, set them aside, and then work on the rest of the project. So this is for the top panel, and we'll glue those two edges. Since it's going to be outside, I'm going to use a waterproof glue. Use a Titebond 3. Sometimes if I'm doing an indoor project, I just use a Titebond 2. So I have the wood for the bottom stretchers here, and the wood for the top stretchers here. And again, I labeled them. What I'm going to do is run them through the planer, because the bottom stretchers I want to be 1 inch thick. The top stretchers I want to be 3/4 of an inch thick, and you'll see why after a bit. All right, so now I have all my pieces laid out for the stretchers. The next thing I'm going to do is work on this cloud lift feature. Now, the main thing for this is using a template. So I cut a couple pieces of hardboard that are the same size as the larger pieces here, because I'll make the cloud lift for each of those, and I can use those again on the top portions as well. But when you're doing the cloud lift portion, you know, figuring out where to put them is sometimes half the battle. So what I do is I measure across and put a mark where I think I want the cloud lift feature to start, and then I make like a 30-degree angle down, and so the width of the piece doesn't really matter. As long as I have that 30-degree angle going down, then that's where I start the second lift on the bottom. So we'll go ahead and we'll make those up, and I'll use a spindle sander as well as a bandsaw and stuff for that, and then we'll use a flush trim router bit to make the cloud lift feature on the stretchers. So now I am going to take the bottom stretchers and I'm going to make a rabbet, and I'm going to do it now because that way the edge is square and I can do that, but the marking will still be on there, so that way I can see the where the cloud lift feature is going to be. But I'll do it on the inside on each of those, and I'm going to do a 1/4 inch rabbet so that way the glass can sit in there. So what I'm going to do is take some double-side tape and put them on these pieces, and then I'm going to take them over to the flush trim router and trim them out. All right, so now I have a flush trim pattern bit put in there. It has a bearing on the top and a bearing on the bottom, so that way I can use either. And I'm just going to have it right against the template. And I'll just drop that down. So now the legs of the piece have been sitting in the clamps, and what we'll do is we'll square those up with the joiner and the planer and the table saw, and then we'll work on fitting the stretchers in between. right, so the what I think is the tough part is over, because now I'll be running it through the router, rounding everything over, and then this was the one for the roof of it. So that'll sit on top of there. What we're going to do is we're going to do kind of a raised panel for the top of here. So we're going to go use the table saw for that. Over at the other table saw, I switched out the dado blade for just a straight blade. And I made a jig that will ride right on the fence. And with that canted at about 5 degrees, I'm going to run it through and I'll raise each of those panels. All right, so next I'm going to take the ceiling piece and I'm going to make a half lap joint for a cross piece to fit in between both of those. So I'll take that over to the dado and run that through, and then I'll size the other piece up. So now I have the half lap joint cut in that ceiling piece, and what I started to do was cut the opposing half lap joint that'll go on across the top. All right, so most of the woodworking's done. I still have to break the piece apart and take it to the router table and round all the edges, and then also do a bunch of sanding, which nobody enjoys. But we'll go there and then see how it turns out. All right, so I glued up the piece. It's all set to go. And all the mortises that we made in the piece, in the base as well as in the ceiling piece, are going to get plugged with little pieces of wenge. So I cut up a piece of wenge that is just barely going to fit in there. And what I'll do is make those up to fit in there, because it's usually the small little details that kind of set the piece apart. So it's worth the extra time to do that. So that'll hold the piece up. If I ever need to work on the light, these will come off and then you can access the inside. Well, here's the finished product. I fumed the oak with some concentrated ammonia, made the hardware and installed that, put the plexiglass in there, and then I wired it and put a LED light inside, so it'll be pretty low maintenance. But if you have any questions, comments, please leave them in the section below. And hope you enjoyed watching it. Hit the subscribe button. And again, thanks for watching.